And we're recording. All right. Today's topic is very exciting. I really waited for today's topic because there's a lot of value to be, added today. It is about immigration, refugees, and the Rwanda policy. Our guest is a leading immigration barrister with expertise in asylum law and private immigration cases. He's the author of the book Welcome to Britain: Fixing Our Broken Immigration System, one of the authors of the blog Free Movement. All right, he's got a lot of thoughts on alternatives for the Rwanda policy. Please welcome our guest, Colin Yeo. Did I pronounce your last name correct?
More or less. Hello, thanks for having me on. My name's Colin Yeo, Y-E-O.
Yeo, absolutely. A pleasure to have you. Really excited to hear, your thoughts on this topic, your opinion, and really want us and whoever listened to this to learn from your expertise on the matter, because there's a lot of vagues and confusion. So it will be really informative to hear. Also, we've got my friend co-hosting today's conversation, Maher. He's also from Syria. He left Syria during the war. He's got Colombian citizenship. He's now in Spain studying and just finished his studies. Maher, say hello.
Hello, I'm Maher. So I'm half Colombian, half Syrian. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this very interesting topic, really, because we both have very different immigration experiences. So
Absolutely.
this will be very interesting.
So what we're going to talk about, we've got a lot to talk, Colin, your background, all of that. We're going to talk a little bit about your book and, plugs, all of what you've got going on. The Rwanda plan, what's the story? What's the latest updates? The news from yesterday about the Home Office reopening Immigration Removal Center. Refugees and immigration in general, good immigrants, bad immigrants, what do they do to the economy, all of that, and the highlight, which is alternatives for the Rwanda plan, and many more topics. So to hand off to you, Colin, how did you end up doing what you're doing right now in immigration and, revolving your life around this topic?
So I studied law at university. I was looking for something to do that was rights-based, and I kind of fell into immigration work. I was applying for a job after I'd finished my studies. There were a lot of asylum seekers arriving in the UK at that time. It was about 2000, and there was a charity that I applied to. I got a job as an in-house advisor, helping refugees who'd arrived at a detention centre, basically. And I found I really enjoyed it. I've had opportunities to move into other areas of law, but I really like doing immigration and asylum work.
Fantastic. So you've actually, so you practice law around this topic, don't you?
Yes. I've been doing it for over 20 years now.
And do you get a lot of cases, immigration cases from different demographics, different backgrounds, and all of that stuff?
Yeah, I certainly have done. I mean, I'm almost sort of semi-retired at the moment. I'm spending a lot of time doing writing work, doing my website, Free Movement. But the cases that I take on are quite a wide variety. Some of it's European law by EU citizens who've got retained rights. Some of it might be legal aid asylum work or drafting grounds for judicial review, all sorts of different things.
Fantastic. If you can tell us a little bit about your book, Welcome to Britain.
Yeah, so I wrote that just before the pandemic, and I wanted to kind of try and step back from day-to-day practice and really think about what the whole immigration system kind of looks like and what's gone wrong with it, how things have changed over the sort of course of my career, usually in bad ways, but sometimes also in good ways. So, for example, the asylum success rate used to be minuscule. Very few people who applied to the Home Office for asylum used to get it, whereas in recent years the proportion's been much higher. Like it's 3 out of 4 asylum seekers now get asylum from the Home Office at their first asking, and then further about half win their appeal. So there's all sorts of things. Some things have got worse, some things have got better, and I wanted to kind of stand back, look at it overall, holistically, and also try and think about different ways to improve things. Although I'm not sure, frankly speaking, that I succeeded much on that front, but that was my effort to do so.
So basically, what it is like you're looking at the situation, kind of like objectively, what's going on, what's the how the process it is in the UK, and basically just laying your thoughts, on the matter, basically. Just
Oh, sorry, you've cut out there. Yeah, and there's different chapters covering different aspects of the system. So there's chapters on the asylum system, but I've covered family immigration, students, work visas, citizenship, deportation, detention. I've looked at the kind of hostile environment policy from a lawyer's point of view, but I've tried to write it for the general public. So the idea is that it's a sort of accessible explanation. In fact, it's not an super easy read. We're not talking about child's play here, but it's written in what's intended to be an accessible style. It's led with I've led all of the chapters with stories from case law or from my own experience to try and show how the rules relate to individuals as well.
I see.
This is only the UK. You're not, or is it Europe generally?
No, it's really with a UK focus. So I just don't have the experience really to write about other countries. I feel like I've got quite a lot of expertise on how things work in the UK, but yeah, my experience is limited to the UK, frankly.
But is the UK fundamentally different when we're talking about immigration law and the procedures involved for an immigrant? Is it fundamentally different from the EU?
It's a really interesting question, and I've certainly got my suspicions about that. So I haven't done like a international comparative survey to really drill down into to be able to answer a question like that. But for example, I know that the application fees both for visas and also for citizenship are way, way higher in the UK than in other comparable countries like the United, I suppose this flatters the United Kingdom to think of them as comparable, but the United States or Canada or Australia. And certainly EU law is much more family friendly than UK law is. But, there are countries in the EU which have quite harsh policies or reputed to have quite harsh policies, like Denmark, for example, as I understand it, have very strict policies on family reunion and also some really quite nasty policies on asylum and refugees as well.
So tell us a little bit about your blog, Free Movement. Is it your blog or do you contribute in Free Movement?
No, it's very much my blog. So I started it in 2007, quite a long time ago now, and it was anonymous for many years. I didn't have my name on it. It was just written by me. I was the only person doing it. And then in about 2012 or something like that, about 10 years ago now, I finally put my name on it and kind of came out as the author of the website, which was quite widely read by immigration lawyers, but not by anybody else. And then it's kind of grown over the last 10 years. I now have other contributors who I pay to write for me, and I try to have a kind of variety of different voices on the website, all of whom tend to be pretty liberal, pretty progressive. We don't have much in the way of kind of pro-immigration restrictions. That's a viewpoint that's not really represented, but we have a range of kind of progressive opinion that on the website by lawyers and sometimes by others as well.
Fantastic. So it is predominantly an immigration, website, immigration blog, basically.
Yeah, it's mainly about immigration law, also to a degree about immigration policy, and it's very widely read by immigration lawyers. But I know that there are quite a lot of campaigners, NGOs, charities, quite a few politicians and journalists kind of follow the output as well to keep track of things. So we've got quite a wide audience now for what is basically a fairly niche kind of subject area.
Got you. So to the people who don't know what the Rwanda policy is, what not just what it is, what's happening in the UK around immigration and why now? Would you just take just a couple of minutes in your explanation? Just tell us what is the Rwanda to somebody who never heard of this before, never heard what's happening in the UK. Just for example, like Maher, like never heard of Rwanda. Just to educate everybody exactly why now, what's the story, what it is.
Yeah, so I'm happy to do so, and I think it's important to understand as well that there are a lot of people here in the UK who simply don't understand it, even where they have heard of it. And in fact, there is quite a lot of prominent conservative politicians who don't understand it at all. So the idea is that basically any asylum seeker who arrives in the UK is now eligible to be sent to Rwanda, and Rwanda will then take over their asylum claim. Although I've slightly misstated that, actually. So it's not that Rwanda will take over, it's that they have to then apply for asylum in Rwanda. And the idea is that Rwanda will then host that person and keep them if they're a refugee, and will settle them in Rwanda. They'll get immigration status in Rwanda. And if they get rejected by Rwanda, Rwanda will be responsible for removing them back to their home country. So there are some people who think, oh, well, it's about, there's all these kind of phrases about externalization, externalization or offshore processing and stuff like that. Some people think that it's about sending people to Rwanda while a decision gets made on their case, and then the genuine refugees will be brought back to the UK. But that's not how it's going to work, actually. It's about just literally sending them to Rwanda, and they'll never come back. They will never be eligible to come back to the UK.
How so? How so?
Well, they're not. They just won't be. You know, there's no route for them to come to the UK from Rwanda once they've been sent there. They'll either be given refugee status in Rwanda, and that's where they'll live, or they'll be sent back to their home country.
Right. So is that is that last thing that you've said written actually like in the policy, or is it that something that we know that the government would do, that once they have their processing there, they're just never going to bring them back, either stay in Rwanda or go back to your country?
No, it's all very plain. I mean, the government's not hiding it. It's in the memorandum of understanding between Rwanda and the United Kingdom, which is on the UK government website. You can read it for yourself. And there's nothing about people being brought back to the UK afterwards. It's all simply about sending people to Rwanda. Rwanda will take over their cases completely. Rwanda will then be responsible for them, and will either grant them refugee status or refuse them and remove them. But there's nothing about them coming back to the UK afterwards.
And you said they're eligible. So does that mean that they're eligible from the government's perspective, like they can do that to them, or they're eligible from their own personal perspectives that they can choose that? Does they have choice?
No, there's no choice in it. So the memorandum of understanding applies to anybody who claims asylum in the UK. So that's a lot of people, though. We're talking about 35, 40, even 45,000 people a year, because the numbers have been going up over the last year or so. They were pretty stable until then, actually. A lot of people thought numbers were going up, but they weren't. But they have actually started to increase over the last year or so.
Why now though? Why out of a sudden why not last year or the year before, or why did they decide this right now? What triggered it?
It's a hard one to say, actually, because it's and I was saying about 35, 40, 45,000 people are eligible. Only a much smaller number will actually be removed. So Rwanda say that they'll only accept maybe a few hundred per year. So the UK government has a very, very wide pool of people to choose from, but has said that they'll only select a relatively small number, and it's going to be people who cross the channel using dangerous or illegal routes, which is basically almost all asylum seekers who arrive in the UK, either in a small boat or in the back of a lorry. They'll be eligible, and some of them will be unlucky enough to get picked for this one-way ticket to Rwanda.
Oh, I see. So it's not all of them. So that's actually one thing that I actually was confused about, and thank you for clearing up. So it's not everyone will be sent to Rwanda. It's a selection of people that meet certain criteria.
Everyone's eligible under the Memorandum of Understanding, so it could be anybody basically who claims asylum. The UK has introduced a slightly narrower criterion of these dangerous or illegal routes, but then there's a real lack of clarity about which people who arrive in that way might end up getting the one-way ticket. And it's, various government ministers said, oh, we're not going to send women, although there's obviously some gender discrimination there. We won't send children. They've said that they won't send Ukrainians. There's a real lack of clarity about who it is who might actually get one of these Rwanda tickets.
Understood. So what are the latest updates about the Rwanda plan? Like, what has been happening like in the past week?
So the government organised the first flight to Rwanda, and I think told about 50 people that they were going to be put on the flight. They were given about a week or two's notice, and all of them ended up contacting lawyers and saying, look, I don't want to get sent to Rwanda got nothing against people in Rwanda, but I don't want to go there. And all of them, in the end, got injunctions preventing them from being removed to Rwanda, pending the outcome of a big court case that's going to be heard, I think, in about 2 weeks' time, some point in July. And that's going to be about whether the whole policy is legal or not. And the court at that point is going to say, look, either this policy can go ahead and these people are going to have to be removed, or it can't go ahead and the people can't be removed. And then there could be some scope for further legal challenges even after that, though.
Gotcha.
Okay, I have a question about this. So, okay, there's
yeah, go for it. It doesn't matter.
Sorry if you hear that. Anyway, why Rwanda? I mean, of all the countries, is there some special agreement with the UK? I mean, it's really bizarre that out of all the countries, it's Rwanda.
The short answer is that it's Rwanda who agreed to it. So there was this kind of series of stories in the newspapers about different countries that had been approached by the UK government to try and accept refugees, and a string of them had said no, and eventually the UK government found a country that would say yes. And what's in it for Rwanda is a big question here, as well as some of us would say the benefit of receiving refugees who are trying to rebuild their lives and have got a lot to contribute to a country. Also, the Rwandan government is getting paid a lot of money, basically, by the UK government. So there's a big fee of 120 million that's the kind of upfront payment. And then we know that there's further payments per refugee and further payments on top of that going forward, although the government's been very cagey about how much those payments might be.
I see. I just want to show you something that yesterday came up. So have you seen this? Home Office to reopen dangerous immigration removal center as part of Rwanda plan. And then here it says an immigration removal center that was closed by the government 4 years ago amid mounting concern about condition is set to reopen in what critics have described as a backward step. So what's this? What's this update to the plan? What's the center?
Well, and Campsfield, unfortunately, is a detention centre I know fairly well. I went to a protest there, over 20 years ago now. I remember when I was at university. It's near Oxford, and it's had a very bad reputation for a very long time as being just a really. All detention centres are bad. They're all inherently violent. People are being kept there against their will. But that one had a particularly bad reputation. And that's why the government closed it down, quite rightly, a few years ago. And it's very sad now to hear that the government is thinking of reopening it in order to follow through on the Rwanda policy. It's an example of the Rwanda policy is bad on its own terms, but it also leads to other bad things happening on the back of it as well. No, I'm very sorry to hear about that.
So how is this connected to it? So would they put some of the asylum seekers here first and then send them off? Or, I mean,
well, there's two problems. I mean, one of the big problems I would say, and this is one of the things I wrote about in the book Welcome to Britain, is that there's a large number of people who effectively get forced underground in the UK. They kind of get illegalized. They end up with unauthorized status because the immigration visa fees are so high. A lot of people can't afford it. Little mistakes in the way that you make an application can lead to you ending up illegal and so on. And there are a lot of asylum seekers who are in the community who are waiting for their decisions because the Home Office has become really inefficient over the last few years, really, particularly since Priti Patel took over in 2019. The backlogs have really built up at the Home Office. And if you tell somebody that they're at risk of being sent to Rwanda, which is a country that they've got no connection to, and the economic prospects there for the future, if they are granted asylum there, are much poorer than in the UK. The prospect of being joined there by your family is not necessarily a very appealing one. So you don't want to go. And if you're told that you're at risk of being sent there, you're going to disappear, basically. A lot of people aren't going to take the risk, and they'll just sort of disappear into the community and they'll stop reporting to the Home Office. Or, if they are given a one-way ticket to Rwanda and they're still in the community, there's no way they're going to turn up to the airport and voluntarily get on a plane to Rwanda.
100%.
Basically, the Home Office says you need to detain people. You need to detain them to stop them from going underground
Oh,
away.
so it's like literally a detention center, basically.
Yeah, it's like a prison. Yeah, I've been there. It's a horrendous place. Massive sort of barbed wire fences and security cameras, and it's prison-like conditions. Yeah.
Well,
Wow.
I'd like to comment on this actually. When I first arrived to Colombia, this crisis in Venezuela was getting worse and worse and worse, and so there was an outpour of immigrants from Venezuela into Colombia, and so what the government decided to do is like to leave the border totally open to these people, because despite lots of Colombians saying, "Hey, you can't just let everybody in. This is not a good idea. You don't know who you're letting in," and the government says precisely because we don't know everybody that's getting in, is that we want to make the procedure to access, the country safely and legally, that we're going to leave the border open, and I believe that it was a really good policy from this government, because basically all of the immigrants decided, or most of them, because to enter legally and try to get jobs and try to access healthcare and all of these things, which would have been very hard, since, I mean, if they would have closed the border passings, well, the border line between the two countries is around 1,800 kilometers. Like, they could just cross over from the jungle, or, but it's very dangerous. But they would find a way. Like, desperate people will find a way, and then you really wouldn't know who's getting in, and even if you use law enforcement or whatever to get them out, they'll always just find a way to get back in. So, I mean, at least the UK is surrounded by water, and so it's harder. But then, at the end of the day, the people will find a way to cross over. So,
I mean,
having
people in the UK complain about the number of refugees here. There are a lot more that have left Venezuela and have entered adjacent countries. The UK
around 1 million, I think, more than 1 million just in Colombia.
Well, yeah, and the last time I looked at the stats, and it was a while ago, was over 5 million have left Venezuela over the last few years. But the UK hosts very few refugees comparatively, and far fewer than comparable countries like France or Germany as well. And when the Ukraine crisis started, other European countries and adjacent countries opened their borders for exactly the same reason you described, in order to allow people to leave legally and to allow them to stay above the radar and be legitimate. And the UK decided not to do that. We decided to impose a visa requirement, which has really slowed the number of Ukrainians arriving in the UK.
But I also have like a big picture question. Okay, so what is the aim of a good immigration policy? Because we see some countries, like going back to my first question, which is like, is the UK immigration policy similar to the EU? But you have some Western countries where you have the right to ask for asylum, basically. There are some other countries, for example, when I was thinking about Syria, many times I talk with Tari and I ask him, like, why aren't there any refugees going to some very wealthy states in the Middle East, where refugees are probably going to feel more comfortable, and it's closer, and they don't have to cross, dangerous, routes with oceans and water and everything. So the question is, like, okay, so these countries do not accept refugees. So what is fundamentally different about these countries vis-a-vis the UK and the EU and the United States? And what is really the aim of a good immigration policy? Because obviously your work, what you do in your work is trying to improve this. It's already, I think it's a humane policy to accept refugees, but then you want to take it one step further.
Yeah, well, I think it's wrong to say that countries in the Middle East don't accept refugees, and provably it's wrong. A lot of them aren't signatories to the Refugee Convention, but they do accept a lot of refugees, actually. So at one point with the Syrian crisis, I think about 25% of the Lebanese population was Syrians. Turkey had over 5 million refugees. I don't have the stats for all of the countries in the region, but I don't think it's right to say they don't host refugees. A lot of them host far, far more than the United Kingdom or other European countries. In terms of kind of what does a good immigration system looks like? It's a really good question, but it's a really big question, and I'd separate out economic and family migration from refugee migration. So refugee migration, I think, is, as far as I'm concerned, and this is a bit of a lawyer's answer, is governed by the Refugee Convention as long as your country is a signatory to it. So anybody who qualifies under the refugee definition, they have a well-founded fear of being persecuted for one of the convention reasons, their race, religion, political opinion, and so on. If they reach your territory, then you have to host them, basically, and you have to try and integrate them into your society. And as far as I'm concerned, it's better to do that as quickly as possible, so that the years of delays that we've got at the Home Office at the moment for people who will overwhelmingly be recognised as refugees is just crazy. They're all going to stay here long term, almost all of them. Why are we making them go through this kind of purgatory of not being allowed to work, being put in these kind of asylum camps that we've got, being denied decent quality accommodation in the community, and being denied mainstream benefits as well? They're on like destitution level support, essentially. Instead, we should be making very quick decisions on their cases and helping them get on their feet and settle back as quickly as possible. And then I'd say something similar for migrants. Now, I feel very strongly that it's wrong to impose too many limits on family migration. If you marry somebody, as long as you can support them, they should be allowed to come to the UK, as long as it's genuine marriage and you can support them. And we've got a lot of rules that make that really very hard and impose additional costs and so on. So I'd say family migration is a bit like refugees. You should, generally speaking, encourage it with only certain restrictions. Other types of migration, I don't really care ultimately what the policy is. What I do really care about is how you treat people once they're here. So if the UK wanted to really reduce the number of skilled work permits that it gave out, well, I think that's a bit ridiculous to do, frankly. It's a bit self-harming because, those are really valuable migrants and they really improve our country. But if the UK wants to do that, then so be it. But the people who do come in, however many of them it is, I really feel you should treat them as what this is one of the things I write about in the book, as citizens in waiting. People who are here for the long term and are part of our society, and therefore you kind of get out of their way, you stop interfering in their lives, you help them to integrate, you don't make things harder for them. And there's loads of aspects of UK immigration policy that don't do that. They really get in people's way, they make their lives really difficult, they make them apply repeatedly for immigration status that they could just be given outright because they're all going to stay long term anyway. We've removed very, very few migrants from the UK. We should just accept that once people are here, they're here to stay.
Right. So Colin, just because I'm conscious of the time and you only got you for almost 15 minutes, I want to get to your alternatives for the Rwanda plan. But I just want to share something and then we'll get into it right away. So I came from Syria, I immigrated here, and my perspective, I'm talking for myself. I really appreciate, what the UK have done to me, and I'm a very, pro UK, not just on this, when you see my conversations or future conversations on the podcast, you'll see I actually have a genuine aim to see in the marketplace, being number one on the marketplace, and I'm probably one of the only people around my neighbor that have my UK flags outside, right? I really appreciate the system here, and proud that I'm very proud that I became British after now I completed 9 years, and as much value I can add to the country. I'm doing it, even though sometimes Uh, the competition is fierce out there in the marketplace, with other countries, but I want to see the UK be number one. Now with everything I do, I've done like masters in biomedical engineering. I've got my own startup. I've got this. I've got multiple things going on. I've discovered something. So when I look around me and when I look at my friends, that have immigrated from Syria here, right? In my circle, I've discovered like a kind of an objective reality. And please push back on this, challenge me on this, is right. So what I've found out is that there are like good immigrants and bad immigrants, or active immigrants and passive immigrants. And what do I mean by this? Like I can see like people, for example, some of my friends, many of my friends, that like they integrate with the social fabric. They want to add value. Sorry, they start businesses, or get educated. They don't rely on benefits. They do something, all of that. But then on the other hand, I also see some people that, for example, don't want to integrate with the social fabric. Don't want to, be, so they want to just go back home and be, say all of that other stuff. They don't want to get educated. They want to rely on benefit, all of that stuff. And the idea is, when I see this, it kind of saddens me, because I feel like one group appreciates and the other doesn't. And the good thing about the good immigrants is that, I've pulled up a study. I don't think we have time to get into the study, but I've pulled up a study, and I'll put the link down in the description. And this study shows that the percent more by immigrants than natives. And this is like I think a study done by the Entrepreneur Net. So knowing all of this, all of the things that I've said, do you, for example, think that we should accept everybody and try to educate everybody, or do you think, for example, they should be kind of like a screening system, better screening system, and what should we do about it? If you can just answer this and then lead your answer to the alternatives to Rwanda plan, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, well, it depends whether you're talking about migrants or refugees. So with refugees, first of all, I really don't like the idea of the good migrant, bad migrants kind of dichotomy. I reject the idea that that's a good way of analysing things. And I think for too long, the UK government did think exactly like that. So skilled workers and highly skilled migrants, they're the good guys, and we want them to come here. But the low-skilled people and the refugees who don't really have very much, and they're all very poor, and they're all brown or black, that kind of, we don't want those. That was the thinking of the UK government, and that's a really bad way of thinking. It's just really don't think that's helpful at all, because some refugees, a lot of refugees have got a lot to contribute, and at the same time, a lot of highly skilled migrants who qualify for these kind of migration programs, they fall on hard times. Things go wrong for them in their lives. Things change for them. And the idea that you can kind of pre-select successful immigrants is a bit of a nonsense. It's like they're humans when it comes down to it. They're just people. You get good people, you get bad people. You get good citizens, you get bad citizens. I don't think migrants are any different to any other category of person. Although I think to contradict that slightly, it is true that migrants as a group tend to contribute more to GDP, to tax take, than other groups, because as a group, migrants who come to the UK tend to be, almost by definition, quite entrepreneurial. They've actually done a lot in their lives to get to the UK in the first place, whether they're refugees who've fled war or other problems. They're the ones who've they haven't stayed in the refugee camps in the adjacent.
They have more to lose. Is the feeling that I have.
Well, and they've kind of moved on. They've tried to take control, and rather than kind of wait near the country of origin in an adjacent country to try and go back at some point, they've kind of thought, well, look, I've got a life to lead. I don't want to stay in a refugee camp for the rest of my life. I want a better future for myself and for my children. And they've moved on, which the Refugee Convention does allow them to do. There's this myth that refugees have to claim asylum in the first safe country they reach. They don't. The Refugee Convention doesn't say that. So even refugees, who are often thought of as being sort of not highly skilled and so on, wrongly thought of in that way, they've got a lot to contribute and they want to work. They don't want to live on benefits, generally speaking. I'm sure that there will be some who do, or something goes wrong. They have all kinds of, we put them through hell once they're here in the UK. They've already been through hell in what they fled from their home country and what they had to leave behind. They've already had a really traumatic journey to the UK quite often, where they've had to take big risks and seen horrible things. And then they get put through this kind of purgatory once they're here, where they're treated in this really demeaning way by our asylum bureaucracy. So they're in a pretty bad state sometimes by the time they actually do get permission to stay. And that is really hard on some, and it is hard for them to sort of get on with things and adjust. But it doesn't make them bad people or bad migrants or anything like that. And that's why I say I feel it's important to treat migrants as kind of future citizens in waiting, people who are going to be here for long term. So don't make things harder for them. Don't put them through this purgatory. Welcome them, help them get on their feet, fund English language lessons. Don't make them not work when they get here. Don't force them into this kind of asylum support system where you only get sort of £35 a week or whatever it is. I think it's maybe a bit more than that these days. But that's really very little money to get on with, and they have to do that for years. When suddenly they get refugee status, as the vast majority do, they don't know what to do. They're not used to living in the UK with money and being able to work. They don't know how to find a job. We haven't helped them in the meantime. So there's all these kind of problems that I think happen there. Now, if in terms of alternative to Rwanda, and this is a question that's sometimes floating around in the mainstream media, you see politicians saying, "Oh, this is the only plan. This is people have got no alternative." Well, that is nonsense. First of all,
it's kind of like a lazy. It's such a lazy policy to just throw, everybody under one blanket policy.
Well, it's weird, and it's like you're asking earlier, why Rwanda? Of all the countries in the world, it just happens to be the country that agreed to this because we're paying them so much money, basically. And the whole Rwanda plan is predicated on the idea that we have to deter people from coming here, and that if we treat a few people really badly, make their lives really miserable by removing them to this country they've got no connection with, where their future prospects are very limited, then that will deter other people from coming to the UK. So this idea of deterrence is right at the heart of the Rwanda policy. That's the whole point of it, really. And of course, the alternative to deterrence is just to welcome people. Like with Ukrainians, for example, over 70,000 Ukrainians have now got visas because there have been problems with the Ukrainian visa scheme. It hasn't been fast enough, but it has helped 70,000 people now come to the UK. We've got a similar visa scheme, except a paid for one, for people wanting to get out of Hong Kong who've got a connection to Britain. 114,000 people have taken up those visas over the last 2 years. Less than 2 years, actually. So again, it's quite a considerable number of people. That's far more than the number of asylum seekers who arrive by irregular means. So the idea that you have to sort of deter people, and yet also you've got visas for only people from certain nationalities who can come here, seems to me a bit of a nonsense. You could have a visa scheme that anybody could apply for, and then you could welcome people. You could attract refugees to the UK in that way if you wanted to, or you could limit the number of visas that are available. You could have a capped scheme, or if it's really about deterrence, if it's really about stopping refugees, which this government basically says is the point of its refugee policy, there are alternatives. So, for example, we used to have a returns deal with the EU. It was called the Dublin System. And basically, the idea of it was that whichever European country you first arrived in would take responsibility for deciding your case. So if you arrived via Italy, then if you came onto the UK from Italy, your fingerprints would show up and you'd be sent back to Italy to have your claim process there.
Why isn't that the case now?
Because we left. We left the EU, and we didn't negotiate to stay as part of that system.
So this was part of the EU.
It's part of the EU.
So does this happen between, let's say, Italy and Germany? Like if somebody went to Italy and then tried to go to Germany, if they found out that he was in Italy first, they will send him back to Italy. Does that actually still happen?
It does still happen. I'm not sure about Germany, actually. So Germany has taken a slightly more generous approach and stopped making use of the Dublin system. They just said, look, we can cope, we can welcome refugees, and they've accepted a lot of refugees in Germany, and by all accounts have been doing a really good job of helping them get on their feet and integrate them as well. I know a lot of Syrians went to Germany.
Oh yeah, no,
But some other countries have still been using the Dublin system and removing literally tens of thousands of asylum seekers back to their point of origin into the EU. Now, I've got reservations about that system. You know, if you get to the UK, I think we'll just let them stay. But if that's not the government's current approach, it's much better to send them back to a European country that is governed by European law, is part of the common European asylum system, is a signatory to the European Convention on Human Rights, where they've got potentially good future in the European Union, rather than some random country like Rwanda that you've picked because it's poor and its government needs money, essentially.
But so it's also very far. I mean, the flight itself, like that's
isn't it costly? Yeah, isn't it costly for the UK?
Very inefficient.
Yeah, and it's only a few people that they're talking about removing, remember. And, you know, as I said at the beginning, a lot of people are eligible under this deal to be removed to Rwanda, but we expect that only, if anybody is removed in the end, that it'll only be at most a few hundred a year. And the idea is that will then put off other people from coming here. And a lot of us doubt that would really be the case, because if you just look at, if you look at the maths of it, if there are 45,000 people arriving in the UK and a couple of hundred of them are being removed, your actual chances of being removed to Rwanda are pretty slim, actually. You'd have to be very lucky. So whether that's really going to act as a deterrent, I would doubt, but I suppose we'll see in the future. But I did want to say, and obviously, the UK has left the EU, so it's not automatically part of the Dublin system anymore, but there are non-EU countries which participate in the Dublin system. So it wouldn't have been impossible for the UK to remain part of that. Countries like Norway, Switzerland, they still actually make use of the Dublin system. So I mean, that possibility is there as well.
I see. Well, Colin, listen, I had a lot of more topics to talk about, but it is what it is. The time came to an end. I just want to thank you for coming on, and sharing, teaching everybody, about the matter and what's going on and the alternatives that you've said at the end. And yeah, just final thought. I think everybody should research this, as much as they can, and see both sides of the story, and come up, don't basically. A lot of people are now, from what I talk to them, they're married to one opinion. So don't marry your opinion, basically. Just listen to Colin, listen to other people and all of that stuff. Listen to everybody's talking about who's expert in this, and just kind of hear all perspective about the matter. But with that being said, thank you, Colin. And, I hope we do this again soon. Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on. Goodbye.
Cheers. Goodbye.
Okay. Thanks, Colin.